The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. It is Wednesday, May the 6th, 2026, and we're live here at CHD TV. In just a second, we're going to be bringing on Richard Hirschman, who is an embalmer from Southeast Alabama, with some very important news for us, for those that say we should stop talking about COVID. Let's hear what he has to say about that. Then we're going to be followed by Miriam Eckenfels, and she's going to bring us the latest from the EMR and wireless update from her department at Children's Health Defense. And then we're going to go to our story of the day. So let's bring on Hirschman. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning, Polly. Nice to meet you.
Well, thank you for being here. Richard, I think if you could just briefly tell people what an embalmer actually does, that would be a great start.
Yes, an embalmer works in a mortuary or a funeral home. And what we do is we prepare a body for public viewing prior to a funeral service once they die. Simply, we inject a chemical into the body that helps preserve the body. And in the process of injecting the chemical, we allow most of the blood that's in the body to come out or drain from the body through the adjoining or the vein that's next to that major artery. So that's simply all we're doing, is we're helping to preserve the body a little bit longer to help make the body more presentable and to slow down the decomposition process for a funeral.
Okay, now to our viewers, what we're about to talk about, if you're eating your breakfast or eating full stop, you may want to just either turn this off and watch it later, or, just be prepared that we're going to be showing some pretty icky things. So through this process of being an embalmer, you saw things that you had not seen before in 2021. Tell us about it.
Yes, it goes back to the beginning of my career. I've been started my career in 2001. And so for 20 years, I've been embalming bodies. I've worked in places where we were centralized. We would do sometimes about 1,000 bodies a year. So it's not like I'm a novice. It's not like I'm somebody that's new at this. 20 years of embalming went by, just doing my job as a regular thing. But in early 2021, in the spring sometime, I started noticing these strange anomalous clots that I began to see, which is just like what you see on the image. They're white and fibrous looking. It's not the only anomaly that I've seen, but this is the main one that has got my attention. And in the very, very beginning, when I first saw it, I thought, hey, that's a strange anomaly. I wonder what happened here. Knowing that there are people that have various diseases, illnesses, and sometimes you might come across something that is highly unusual. So I didn't think much of it. But the problem was, as 2021 was going along, I began to see this more and more and more and more. And by September of 2021, I actually took my first picture of one of these, because as I was speaking with a number of people talking about blood clots, they were assuming a traditional blood clot, or blood clotting that might be agonal, which is a thicker blood clot that might happen. And so this image that I started taking in September 21 was the beginning of me starting to document what I'm seeing. And I even shared it with my doctor when I only had 3 images on my phone. And he was so fascinated by it that he called another doctor into the office to look at it. Neither one of them could explain what I was seeing. But here we are. Here we are. Some of these clots are very large, like what you see in that picture right there. That large one is about 19 inches long.
Richard, basic lesson here. How would a blood clot form? What does that even look like in the body?
Well, a blood clot is typically red because it's full of blood. And a normal blood clot is gelatinous or looks like grape jelly. It does happen post-mortem. It can happen. And it can happen during the dying process where the blood starts to slow down as the body's trying to preserve the main organs. But they're red. They're red because they're primarily blood, and blood's trapped all up in it. It's a part of the natural healing process, and blood clot begins to form typically with the body with fibrinogen. And fibrinogen, or fibrin, which is made up of three types of fibrinogen. It's an alpha, beta, and gamma chain. And if you think about fibrinogen, I'll use this as a paper clip. This is just simply a paper clip meant to hold pieces of paper together. And fibrinogen begins to bind together with the alpha, beta, gamma chains, and they create what's called fibrils. And these fibrils create a mesh, and it starts to trap red blood cells and different things that's in there in order to create a clot. But the analysis that we've done, and we've done lots of analysis, and just here's a little picture of some of the analysis that's been done. What we're finding is that it's an amyloid, which is nothing more than a misfolded protein. And if you think about that paper clip, this is also a paper clip. It's all twisted up and out of shape. And what we believe is happening, that the body is creating amyloid fibrinogen, and they're all coming together and clumping together into these big tight knots. The problem with that is your body also has a mechanism to break down clots. It's not, clotting is a normal thing. You cut yourself, you create your body creates and puts fibrils there to help stop the bleeding. If you didn't have fibrinogen, you would bleed to death. The problem is with the analysis, we have found that instead of a 1-to-1 ratio like this, what we're finding is it's 9 parts of beta, 4 parts of gamma, and 1 part of alpha. At least that's what the analysis showed in these clots. It's out of whack. It's just out of place. Whether these clots are forming prior to death or after death, I'm not a doctor or a pathologist, so it's hard for me to tell. All I can tell you is that these clots that I'm seeing and continue to see to this day began right after, or I started seeing these in early 2021 in the spring.
And so, therefore, we are assuming that the COVID shots played a part in this.
Yes, and one of the reasons in the beginning, of course, I was like everybody else. I was concerned. But we have 2 papers that were right here. In one from June, or one from April and one from June. The one in April was from the New England Journal of Medicine saying SARS-CoV-2 vaccine-induced immune thrombotic thrombocytopenia. That means vaccine is inducing thrombotic clots, okay? And then the one in June from American Cardiology of Medicine, it reads vaccine-induced thrombotic thrombocytopenia, VITT, and COVID-19 vaccines, what cardiovascular clinicians need to know. Well, that's fascinating because they're linking a vaccine causing clotting issues. But then there was a preprint here dated October 13th of 2021. SARS-CoV-2 spike protein induces abnormal inflammatory blood clots. Well, if we're going to start to blame the spike protein for the clotting from COVID, which is possible because we did notice an increase in clotting during the pandemic, it makes sense to me that the vaccine would make this issue worse, because if we already know that the spike protein induces abnormal clotting, then why are we injecting millions of people with the spike protein that can induce such a phenomenon?
So, Richard, I don't suppose you know this, but did you know if these people were vaccinated? So my biggest question is, did you see these blood clots in the unvaccinated? Well, the people didn't take the COVID shot, let's call them that.
Well, that's a great question. I've had that question many times. I am what I have been doing since 2015 is I'm a trade embalmer. I don't actually sit with the family members of the deceased, so I can't ask them. But sometimes I can was, especially in the beginning, I was asking the funeral director if they could find out. And in the beginning, it was almost 100% yes, they were vaccinated when I did get the answer. However, as time went on, I did get a couple of them that were not vaccinated and had these abnormal clots, but then found out, because the funeral director asked family members, had these people received some form of a blood product, like a blood transfusion or something like that? And the answer was yes. I brought this question up with some of the doctors that I know, and they said it was of high concern. So yes, I've seen it in the unvaccinated, but typically it was because of that. Now, because the virus itself creates spike protein, is it possible that we can see these in the unvaccinated? I believe the answer would be yes at this point.
Well, I mean, that's just a massive, like, we do not ever want to have a blood transfusion. I mean,
It is, however, at the same time, if you're in a life and death situation, what are you to do? I mean, if you don't get the blood transfusion, you're gonna die. You're likely to die. And if, you know, I can't blame anybody for accepting a blood transfusion in a life or death situation. But voluntarily, no, I would not just take it just because.
no, we need unvaccinated blood banks for sure.
And if it's in the spike protein, Miss Polly, we all know now, since all of this stuff has happened, they talked about this thing called shedding, and apparently it was in some of their papers that it was a thing. And if that's the case, who's to say every one of us isn't affected to some degree?
Yeah, it's shocking, actually. Right, let's talk about age group because we know that the children aged 6 months and above got these COVID shots. Did you see the young, or was it really just the elderly?
In the beginning, the majority of the bodies that I would see these abnormal clots were older. And that made sense to me because the elderly was the first group of people that they were trying to protect by injecting these vaccines into. However, as time went on, I started seeing this in younger and younger people. In the very beginning, before I went public, I was trying to do a lot of research on clotting. And one of the things that I found was the older you get, your body starts to produce more and more of this fibrinogen. You have a higher risk of getting clotting issues as we age. So there might be a reason why we still see this primarily in older people, but I have seen it in younger people as well. And
Do you
I'm
mind
talking
how
all.
young?
Well, I've seen it in preteen, and again, I can't say this is what killed the individual. I can't say these clots killed them because I'm not a pathologist. My main concern is this substance that's floating around in the blood, whether it's soluble at one point, then turns into a solid. Without this substance in their body, would they have lived longer? And that is a huge deal. We have to know, we have to figure out. But there are people like Lindsay House, a registered nurse that was vaccine injured, and she was severely vaccine injured. Y'all might have talked to her at one point, I'm not sure. But anyway, Dr. PhD Kevin McCairn in Japan, I had sent him some of these samples to look at, and he's done some of the analysis work, and he found them to be amyloid-like. And he's now working in Japan with a protocol and a double plasmapheresis thing or something like that, where they filter the plasma of the individual and then do some kind of stem cell therapy that's helping these people. And Lindsay, who was severely injured, is now able to run again when she was pretty much wheelchair bound at one point. So I'm glad there's people that are working diligently to try to help those that are injured.
So, Richard, to the people out there that do write to us and say, "Oh, CHDTV, can you stop talking about COVID? It's so boring." we've talked about this on Monday, and we got a massive response from our viewers on this, by the way, all saying, please do keep talking about it. But why you're still seeing these clots today? People are, is it because they're still getting jabbed, or is it because they've got the effects of the early jabs and just years later is coming to this?
It's a great question. And I know that the population in general has gone down. I was talking with an individual that told me 30 million Americans last year got the latest shot, which is less than 10% of our population. So something's changing. The people are waking up. If they change the how they're doing the vaccines or making the vaccines, how are we to know? We don't know. With all of the issues that were coming out in the very beginning, did they change something? Did they do something to make it a little bit safer? Did they not make it a little bit safer? I can't answer that question. All I know is the things that we are seeing in the mortuary. One of the things that bothers me, especially with the children, is I have seen more fetal demises, babies that are not making it to full term in the last few years, and I've seen in my entire 20 plus years of experience before the rollout of this vaccine. Are they linked together? I have a strange suspicion the answer is yes, especially when I was listening to a podcast from Glenn Beck when he was talking to somebody. And they were talking about how fertility is down or people are not having children as much as they used to. All of these things saying why our population isn't expanding or growing at the same rate because people are less interested in having children. Well, my thinking is, well, if that's the case and fewer people are getting pregnant, then wouldn't you think I would be seeing fewer fetal demises at the funeral home as opposed to more fetal demises? That is an alarming thing. I'm very, very concerned that the population will be impacted because of this. And I think it might be causing infertility issues on top of a population that's already not procreating as much as it used to.
So, Richard, basically, I mean, that's horrifically sad. So, if these babies, and we've done enough stories on this channel to say that we truly believe the vaccines and the amount of vaccines pregnant women get as well is causing this fetal demise, then that means that the medical profession or the medical professional are killing babies. We're killing Americans, future Americans. That is a serious, serious thing that's happening right now. I think it's murder.
I think, well, look at how long, when thalidomide came out, not everybody that had thalidomide had what they call a thalidomide baby, where the baby was born deformed. But they did stop using thalidomide on pregnant women because they later found out it was causing birth defects. And look how many years went by before they started acknowledging that cigarette smoking can cause cancer and other health issues. This is huge because unlike thalidomide and smoking, this was mandated on the population to take an experimental vaccine that had no long-term studies. And now all of the evidence that's coming out, like the Naomi book, the Pfizer papers, Naomi Wolf's book, there's so much evidence pointing to the harms that this has caused, and it's still on the market, though only less than 10% of Americans decided to get the latest shot. So we are winning in this war, but will there be accountability? I'm almost afraid to say. I'm not hopeful on that.
No, and meanwhile, babies, children, with Children's Health Defence here, they're dying, and that's totally unacceptable and utterly tragic. So here's my question for you. You speak out about this, and we're so grateful to you speaking out. You don't have to do this, but you do it. I presume because you want to warn people, you want to educate people. But you must get also with that, I know from experience, comes a lot of hate. How are you coping? What's happening?
Yeah, nobody likes to be called a liar, a I've been called all kinds of things, a grifter, when I've never accepted a penny from anything. I have nothing to sell. I have no books to sell. I have nothing to promote here, except for I feel that you, the people, have a right to know. And if these anomalous things that I'm seeing in the blood of individuals is linked to this vaccine, it needs to be known. You have a right to know. This started in early 2021. I'm not the only one speaking out. Tom Haviland and Laura Kasner have done surveys of embalmers. The majority of the embalmers are now acknowledging they're seeing the same phenomenon. People like John O'Looney over in the UK, an amazing man with a nice moral compass, has been warning people about these things as well. Wally Hooker in Indiana. There's other people that are out there saying stuff. But people have a right to know. That's why we say this. I was in a conversation, a private meeting recently with one of the doctors that I know overseas and a scientist. And he was under the impression these clots were going away because I hadn't been speaking about it for a while. So I decided to do an ex post after many months of not doing one. And recently that one just got like 350,000 views, which is amazing because I was so shadow banned. Most everything I put out there was not getting much traction at all. So people have a right to know.
How do we follow you on X? I didn't know you were on X. How do we follow
Uh,
you?
yeah, I mean, I'm on X. I don't post much, but that's my stuff. Richard Hirschman at R_Hirschman. I've been on there now for 3 years. So you can follow me there, but the people that need to follow people like you, people like Dr. Ryan Cole, people like Dr. Peter McCollough, Pierre Corey. There's so many people out there that need to be followed because their information that they're putting out is way deeper and much more. The only thing that I have to offer people to see are physical evidence of the anomaly that I've been seeing since 2021. And if these things are linked to the spike protein, which I think they are, we all have a right to know. And if you're going to continue on getting vaccinated with more shots, cancers, all kinds of illnesses are on the rise. Please do a little bit of research before you put more of that into your own body, and especially before you put it into your children.
Richard Hirschman, you are an amazing human being, so brave, and thank you for speaking the truth. It's so important. Like, can you imagine if everybody who saw things like you did spoke out? This whole thing would have been ended ages ago. Babies would be saved. So thank you for all the work that you have done and continue to do. We're so grateful to you.
Thank you, Polly. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for being on. Okay, everybody, we're going to go now to Miriam Eckenfels for her EMR update.
Well, good morning, CHD. My name is Miriam Eckenfels, and I'm the director of CHD's EMR and Wireless program. Welcome, everyone, to another EMR and Wireless segment. Today, we're going to talk about what's happening in Lewis County, Washington, where residents are fighting a proposed cell tower project in their community. We always talk to our audience about the importance of maintaining local control and pushing back against federal overreach when it comes to wireless infrastructure, such as cell towers and small cells. And we always talk about the importance of having strong wireless ordinances. But most of this is abstract and theoretical for our audience until a cell tower is actually proposed in someone's backyard. So today we'll talk with Alan and Bekki Watts, two community leaders fighting a cell tower in Lewis County. And they're also the founders of Lewis County for Safe Tech. And they're going to talk to us about their very real, very practical fight against the cell tower that is proposed in their neighborhood. We'll also be joined by Scott McCollough, our lead litigator for EMR and wireless cases, who is representing Lewis County for Safe Tech and the residents through our Stop 5G initiative. So first I'm going to welcome everyone. Hi, Alan. Hi, Bekki. Hi, Scott. Welcome to CHD TV.
Hello.
Good seeing all of you.
Hello,
So
everyone.
I want to start with Alan and Bekki. I imagine you guys never thought you'd be here, knee deep into a cell tower fight. Maybe you never thought that you had to acquaint yourself with this area of law and policy. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about what happened in Lewis County and walk us through, what's the proposed project, what happened so far, where do things stand?
Sure. Well, first of all, you said we were knee deep into it. I would like to think that we're eyebrow deep into it. It's it's been a lot of time and effort over the last eight or 9 months. We recently moved into our house. Within a few months, we found out that there was a proposed cell tower going in immediately next door. It's about 400 feet from our house. Was not something that anybody was aware of. The way that we found out about it was a public posting at the beginning of a private drive coming up to our house. So we quickly went through the process of trying to identify legal help through acquaintances here in our community. We were able to get in touch with CHD. Scott's been great. You've been great. The other people at CHD have been great, and we started this fight. One of the first things that we learned, Bekki may say something about this a bit later, but one of the first things we learned is that you can't use threat to health as a means to fight a tower that's going right next to your house. But basically, we made all the filings that we could. We went through the public comment period. We went through the hearing, and we're just coming out of the hearing now. That's where we are at the moment.
Right. And so you mentioned, that what we also always remind our viewers that you cannot take health and environmental concerns of RF radiation into consideration when a local authority decides on a cell tower placement, which is obviously a very restrictive and ridiculous federal framework that greatly restricts communities' ability to push back. Talk to us a little bit about your concerns that you had when you first learned about the project. Were health concerns your primary objection, and sort of like how did you learn about that? Were you always concerned about RF radiation, or was it new to you? Have you thought about it before? Walk us through that process.
Yeah, I think as a community, the first thought was, how in the world can something this big and this commercial come into our neighborhood? Because we live in such a beautiful, pristine, gorgeous area. It's very quiet. It's rural. Everybody in our neighborhood moved here to get away from commercial everything. And so aesthetics definitely was one of our biggest concerns. And but even more so than that, for me and my family, a couple years ago, I acquired an autoimmune disorder. And being a veterinarian, I deep dove into everything I could possibly read about medical research that had been done on anything that caused inflammation in the cells, anything that caused oxidative stress. And radio frequencies was one of those things. And I did not know that until just within these past couple of years. And so I took a deep dive into that, and we changed a lot of our own personal behaviors around our own home to try to minimize our exposure to radio frequencies. And then to move here and be bombarded by this cell tower proposition was something that we kind of felt, that we had been prepared for, because I felt very blessed to have had that knowledge and my medical, expertise, especially in that area. But the heart behind my fight for my family and my neighbors, who we have only gotten to know very well because of this process, which is another blessing, is the health concerns for sure. Knowing that there is a lot of documentation and a lot of research out there that is real, that radio frequencies definitely affect the biology of a person's body and the cells of people's bodies, especially children. And we have 2 children. They've been with us in this fight every step of the way. They've been a vital part of really raising community awareness, putting up signs, talking to neighbors, getting people to sign petitions. They've just been a huge part of this, and I really want them to know that they can, have a say in their own health and the health of the community, and be a huge part of the community no matter their age. So for me, health is the reason why we're sticking in this fight, and we're just gonna keep going. We have to.
That's amazing. And you guys have, done an amazing job mobilizing your community and being outstanding community leaders. We work with communities all across the United States, and Lewis County for Safe Tech has really rallied together and has put up a superb fight, a fight that has not been without challenges, right? I think we can all acknowledge that. So Scott, we've been with Lewis County for Safe Tech since the public learned of the permit application, and we have been trying all sorts of legal avenues to stop and delay the tower. So why don't you, from a legal perspective, tell us a little bit about what happened, where things stand, and maybe also touch upon some of the challenges that we faced, and in this particular community.
Well, first of all, let me start out by talking about the federal issues. As y'all just heard, there's a provision in the federal law that says that in local permitting cases, the local jurisdiction cannot say no to a tower based on health effects. Now, frankly, I think, and many others do as well, think that's ridiculous and perhaps even unconstitutional. We have to address that, however, at the national level, and that's one of the things we're doing with the 704 No More initiative. But meanwhile, at the local level, since that issue has been taken away from you, you have to figure out ways to deal with this tower coming up, in Bekki and Alan's case, right on their doorstep. You have to come up with theories that are allowed under the federal law. The good news about the federal law, however, is that it actually does, especially in the Ninth Circuit, where we are in their case, does allow for local communities to shape an ordinance that can allow saying no based on things like aesthetics, property values, other negative impacts to those who would be, directly affected by a tower. Sadly, one of the problems we have here is that the ordinance in Lewis County was last changed in 2001, and it does not directly incorporate many of the protective things that local jurisdictions can do. And so what we are hearing from the other side in this case is, well, the way the ordinance is written, none of these other considerations really mean anything either. Now, we don't think that the ordinance precludes consideration of them, but it doesn't expressly say that you can. So as y'all may have heard from some of our other sessions, it's really important that you look at what the ordinance says in your local community and make sure that it either does allow for these kinds of considerations to be taken into account, and if it doesn't, then to begin to work on changing the ordinance.
Right. Let me just jump in here a little bit and drive that point home. Local ordinances are what you're going to be litigating based upon on the local level. So if you have a very weak local ordinance that does not allow your county or your town to take certain things into consideration when a cell tower application is filed, then they are not able to take that into consideration. And so it gives you less ammunition in a fight against a cell tower. And so it's very important that our viewers have a look where they live, look at the wireless ordinance, look at the framework, whether it has wireless provisions, because telecom has been working very hard in states and counties across the nation to advocate for weak and non-protective wireless ordinances. And communities need to be aware of that, and they need to advocate and work towards a safer wireless ordinance. So now back to you, Scott. I'm sorry.
Well, thank you for saying that a lot better than I did. It is, because that's really the starting point. When a case comes in, like this one, that's the first place we go. on the legal team and the advocacy team. We try to see what the law is in the local community. And what's important is the federal statute, which everybody always says they hate, actually allows for these things. And so they need to be in there. Here, however, we've got a specific application dealing with an existing ordinance. And what we have to do and have done here is try to figure out ways to argue that the tower should be denied, maybe moved, based on the things that are in the ordinance. And we mounted what I think was a fairly good set of challenges. We certainly made the other side think about a few things, and we had them scrambling. Where we are now, though, is that we just got a decision a week or so ago, and it has recommended approval, said that the tower will be approved with some changes that were and some conditions which were due in part to some of the things that we had argued. Now, obviously, we're not real happy about this outcome, and we're trying to figure out how to deal with that even still. We do have some options, and we're looking at them, and we're probably going to be trying to work with the second phase at the county. They have to go back and get a building permit. They have to propose some other things. They have to come up with a plan for how they're going to improve the private road that goes from the county road to this site. And we're going to try to be involved in that and convince the decision makers that that road really can't and should not be improved, which would, if accepted, have the effect of functionally denying their ability to build this tower, even though they now may have a permit.
Right. And I think that's an important point to understand and to take home as well, that these cell tower fights are oftentimes long, they're very complicated, they involve different advocacy and legal maneuvers, and it's almost always involves certain setbacks and challenges. So Alan and Bekki, when you first heard of the decision that they were going to recommend to grant the permit, what went through your head? How was that for you guys?
Well, initially, shock. We had in the back of our minds that this was an uphill battle, that it was going to be difficult, that the chances of winning maybe not the best. But there's always that hope in the back of your mind that the hearing is going to go your way. When the hearing doesn't go your way, you have to take a reality pill and take a deep breath and say, okay, what's the next step? Took us a day or two to get over that, but we are going to take the next step. We just had another community meeting here in our neighborhood yesterday. Good turnout. People feeling the same way. That stinks that we didn't win. But people also have dug in, and they're also ready to take the next step as well.
Yeah, I would just add that remaining hopeful, is a huge part of what we're trying to do here. And our community has been with us every step of the way. And just knowing that we're not in this by ourselves, we have really rallied the community, and everybody has been super supportive. And CHD and Scott have been so helpful in not only educating us on what's going on, but really leading the way and giving us those next steps, because that's kind of all you can do. You can't really think so far in the future. You just have to think, what's your next step, and tackle that next step. So we're doing that together as a community, and it's been so good to just have a network of people together, all rally together to do this together.
Right. I can imagine. And, I think you guys have done an amazing job at rallying and keeping together that community. I don't know if you had an advocate in you your whole lives, or if you just, were forced to be one. But how was that to grow into this role of advocating? And then what do you think are some of the things that you would like other communities to know? Maybe communities that are facing a cell tower proposal, or even maybe communities that have not even thought about that this might be an issue that they will have to get engaged with.
Yeah, I really feel like we were brought here for, a greater purpose than just enjoying a beautiful home on a beautiful hill in a new place, and that we love so much, because everybody on our hill was really hopeful in the beginning that this would just silently go away, or we could write some public comments and really express our feelings, and that those feelings would be heard and by the county, and that the county would just go ahead and deny this thing from the very beginning. And there's just no way, right? Like, we knew we were going to need to take some massive action, and we've never done anything like this before. And I never saw myself in a role like this before, learning codes, learning more about everything, legislation, the government, how all of these things work. And so it's been a huge learning curve for me, especially, more so than you, and for our kids. And then just educating the community. So never found ourselves maybe being in a situation like this. But when I say health is at the root of my fight, yes, we cannot fight that. You know, through this process we've been through so far, we have not been allowed to bring it up or fight that issue. But I think that's my greatest, why are you doing this? And so I'm going to continue to lead this, you know, and keep this fight going. And I honestly, in the very beginning, I felt like Aaron Brockovich, like, bringing my kids along, and we're going to go all over the county, and we're going to get people to sign stuff, and we're going to talk to them about it, and we're going to be those cell tower people. And but then it became more than just a fight for our own hill. What CHD and Scott really encouraged us to do was to make this something that we could start and carry the torch, and then later let this be about Lewis County. Anybody in Lewis County, yes, we're having to deal with this right now, but that neighborhood over there, that they might be next. And so really to start awareness and education about why we don't want these cell towers in our area, and fight the fight, and then potentially pass that baton on to somebody else, has been kind of a cool thing to think about, that we're doing this not just for ourselves. Hopefully this will help the grander, county.
Yeah, and I would like to add too that Bekki and I are kind of the face of Lewis County for Safe Tech. I can't overstate the amount of support that we've had from our community. We had close to 100 people show up in person at the hearing. We've had hundreds of people that have been supportive of us in other areas, in other ways. So it's not just Bekki and I. I tell our community every time we meet with them that had it not been for their support, I would have been out a long time ago. This is not something that you want to go through by yourselves. It's not pleasant, but if you have a community joined together like ours has, we've seen people in our community that prior to this had issues with each other that have come together because there's a common purpose that they're fighting against. And maybe they haven't become friends, but they're at least talking to each other now and on the same page. And those are things that we see some good coming of this. And so it's not just Bekki and I. It's our community that's fighting this.
Right. That's a beautiful story. I was just taking notes because I heard you say a couple of things, right? Like, I think the one thing that really stands out to me is how much you have just embraced this role, right? Like, so I think, people need to embrace the fact that that's, the cell tower lady, right? That's who they are going to be. I think this community element, right, is something that we always stress when we work with communities. Like, find your friends, find your neighbors, educate each other, find the resources, share, really build a grassroots network, because it is what's going to sustain you, both in terms of energy, in terms of community support, showing up for hearings, but also financially, because cell tower fights can get quite expensive. And then also be in for the long run, right? Like, it's not a week of effort, it's not a month of effort, it's oftentimes months and months and months, and sometimes years of sustained effort. And so I think you guys are a stellar example of how, a local opposition is organized and ran on the ground. And we were all very impressed with, the Lewis County communities. It's very true. And it would be amazing if that was something that spread through the country. And for those of you who are looking for resources in their cell tower fight, we have a lot of available materials on stop5g.org, as well as 704nomore.org. There is a resource tab on 704 No More that really outlines all the different aspects as to why we should all be opposed to cell towers and information that you can share. Scott, I want to turn from the local level to the federal level for a second. Why don't you tell us a little bit what you can about what's going on the federal level and why it is so important that we keep pushing 704 No More and, to topple that regime of federal preemption?
The federal statute at present does take away a lot of things. And our major policy position is that important issues that are going to be impacting somebody and many people in a local community need to be decided at the local community. And we may not always like how it is decided locally, but people who are interested in something are far more likely to be successful at the local community level, especially if they get organized like the folks in Lewis County have. I certainly have this feeling that that group's going to continue and sustain itself and maybe even get involved in other areas beyond just whether there's going to be a cell tower in their neighborhood. They now know each other. They know how to work together. If there's some other objective that they want to obtain, they now have the model for it. And that's what is supposed to be done at the local level. The problem is at the federal level, a lot of issues are taken away. And CHD has been very involved in that for over 5 years now. We're doing two things in particular. One, we're gathering together and hopefully we'll soon be launching a case challenging the constitutionality of 704, many aspects of it, including especially the prohibition on consideration of health effects. Separately, CHD won a case at the DC Circuit Court of Appeals going on 5 years now. It told the Federal Communications Commission that it needed to look at its exposure guidelines. And the commission has just simply refused to do what the court told it to. We've asked the commission several times to please do what the court told it to. The commission has ignored those requests. So in the very near future, we will be going back to the court, asking the court to tell the FCC that it meant what it said. And since the FCC is apparently the one that gets to decide these issues about health effects, it needs to do what the court says and take a look at the health effects of wireless radiation. More news is coming on that pretty soon.
Right. And so everybody stay tuned. If you want to stay up to date on 704 No More and all the things that we're doing on the federal level, go to 704nomore.org and subscribe to our email list. We sent out all pertinent information, including monthly campaigns through the 704 No More email list. You can also follow us on social media on all major platforms. We are at Stop5G Near Me and at 704 No More. And that'd be it for today. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you very much, Alan and Bekki, for coming on today. And thank you as always, Scott.
Bye, everyone.
Can you tell everyone who you are, please?
I'm Gwen Murray.
And you have 2 children.
2 children, grown children, yes.
And this is about which son is this about?
My youngest son, Bryson.
And how old is he today?
He is 26.
All right, let's go back and you tell the story from when he was a baby, how he was.
There were issues even as a baby with his shots at infancy. The first 2 years he had a lot of allergy, congestion, restlessness things that didn't add up. At 18 months, he stopped walking. He actually just sat down and couldn't walk. And we found out that he had an effusion, which is edema, in his hip. And no one could explain why. Actually, I have something to tell before that. I don't know if you want to edit it differently.
Well, we're live, so.
Oh, I'm sorry. About 8 weeks before he was 18 months old, so he was about 16 months, he broke out in this really horrendous rash. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. And we were first told he had chicken pox, but he had had a chicken pox vaccine in January of that year, and this was September, so it was roughly about 9 months later. And I mean, it was crazy. It looked like his meat, like his skin was ground meat, but it was a rash. And within a month of that rash, he stopped walking. And we found the swelling in his hip, and at that point they started him on an anti-inflammatory medication, which he began to walk again after that. And he was on that for about 2 years, and then we tapered him off of it, and he was fine. Around age 2, he didn't get any other vaccines. And I was staying home with him, and we didn't have health insurance that covered preventative care. So most of his elementary age, fairly healthy. My older son, who had a lot more vaccines, was sick a lot. He was not. Hindsight, I can see the difference. But in middle school, he was changing schools, and it was recommended to us that he get caught up on his vaccines. So he got all caught up at once.
Do you know how many he got?
It's hard for me to talk. I think he got 4 or 5. There wasn't anything immediate, but he he did get swine flu that year, which, if you remember, that was kind of a crazy thing. We had young children dying that we knew about, so it was pretty scary when he was diagnosed with that. And then he was really okay. Still not a lot of sickness with him other than that. When he got to high school, like as a freshman, I know he got a staph infection on his face, which was kind of weird, and we didn't have an explanation for that. But he would complain to me that he had a lot of numbness and tingling in his hands, and he thought he'd slept on his hands at night and that kind of thing. And I won't go into all the details because there's a lot, but
I'm interested in the symptoms because we have so many young people today.
Okay.
So it's tingling in the hands.
Yeah, that was one of the first things. No, it was really just his hands, and it was just vague. And his junior year in high school, he was rear-ended. And possibly, we were told he had a concussion. So he was under concussion protocol for a couple of weeks. He'd had concussions before because he's an athlete, and he'd gotten hit in the head and fell down, and those kind of things that boys do. But he was sleeping a whole lot during that time, unnaturally sleeping a lot. And that was in April. In May, several weeks later, we had some friends over who had small children, and he was outside playing with them, and he told me later that he wasn't able to run with them. I mean, this is my child that does backflips, just stands up and flips. And we thought it was related to the concussion. So a couple of weeks from there, it was summer here, and we had a boat. He loved to wakeboard, and he would flip on the wakeboard, and just very good. And my husband and I took him out on the lake. During the week, there was no one on the lake. It was just like glass. It was beautiful. And it was the first time of that year that he had been out on his board, and he couldn't get up at all. He would get up on the board and then would fall down. He'd get up on the board and fall down. And I knew then something was wrong. So he went in, had an MRI, and they found the MS lesions. It was they hospitalized him just to clarify the diagnosis and so forth. And the neurologist that saw him immediately wanted to put him on a DMARD drug, which he went on an infusion, a monthly infusion. And he did that for 2 years. And he hated every minute of it. And just the symptoms that he would have, he hated it. So he ended up taking himself off that medicine. At that time, he was over 18. He wanted to do that, and he did. And he did well for a while, and about 6 months after he went off the med, he literally crashed. He had been at one point walking about 8 miles a day in the job he had, and that was in June, and by September he was in a wheelchair. And the disease was progressing very rapidly up his spine. He couldn't sit up straight anymore, and he couldn't breathe. We were able to get him into a clinical trial at Northwestern University with Dr. Richard Burt. Dr. Burt was treating people with MS and scleroderma and different autoimmune diseases with a stem cell transplant. And the trial was in its 10th year at the time we were there, and he had a stem cell transplant in 2019. And the point of the stem cell transplant was the whole point is trying to arrest the progression of the disease. It really is not a curative thing, but it's trying to stop your body from attacking itself. And it was successful. He right now has no evidence of active disease in his body. He's not on any medications, and he hasn't been in the last 5 years since the transplant. However, for those 3 months that the disease was so rampant in his body, he has a lot of damage all on his left side, which they told him in Chicago when he had the stem cell that they couldn't guarantee that he would gain function back. So that's been 5 years ago. He lives a very sad life. He has a difficult time walking. He wall walks, and he won't use any assistive devices. He's very prideful that way. He doesn't get out. He doesn't go anywhere. He just stays home.
He live with you.
Mm-hmm. So, been very hard.
Very hard. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for talking about it, because, as I said, we're getting more MS diagnosed with these COVID shots than we've ever had before. So
We say that's the gift MS gave us, just the truth of shots and pharma in general. That's the one blessing we get out of it, is we understand the truth. It was interesting when we were in Chicago, because we were told before his transplant that the actual procedure, the transplant procedure, would knock out all the shots he had ever had. It was like he had never had them. And so at the time, and us not having the knowledge we do now, we're like, well, is he required to go back and get those? I mean, and we were told then that it wasn't a recommendation, that was truly a personal decision, which kind of let me know that there was something to them. At that point, I still didn't understand all that we know now.
Is there anything else you want to say to the people?
No, just thank you for the opportunity to share his story. Thank you. Thank you.
46% of the American people say mandates are dangerous, they're damaging, and vaccine science isn't settled.
The steady decline of childhood vaccine rates.
Vaccination rates continued to decline last year.
There's a discourse about vaccines that didn't exist before.
Children's Health Defense.
Children's Health Defense.
Children's Health Defense.
Children's Health Defense.
Children's Health Defense is the leader in the health freedom movement.
The Department of Health and Human Services is overhauling the immunization schedule.
Now only recommending 11.
We are making recommendations that are science-based, that are common sense.
Secretary Hegseth discarding the mandatory flu vaccine requirement.
Your body, your faith, and your convictions are not negotiable.
People recognize you have to be able to make an individualized decision.
For the first time, the U.S. FDA will acknowledge that COVID-19 vaccines killed American children.
States are putting in place medical freedom laws. There's bills in Congress that Children's Health Defense is supporting, the GRACE Act for the right to religious exemptions, the End the Vaccine Carve-Out, ending liability protection, and Tom Massey's bill to repeal the PrEP Act.
One of the most aggressive medical accountability lawsuits in decades.
Suing the American Academy of Pediatrics.
CHD is suing under RICO laws, claiming that the AAP operates as a criminal enterprise and has for decades.
A federal judge yesterday blocked Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s recent overhaul of the nation's childhood vaccine schedule.
They basically just froze all vaccine policy.
The American Academy of Pediatrics and other medical groups filed a lawsuit arguing the vaccine changes violated federal law.
Which is outrageous for a single judge sitting in Boston to stop any work at the Centers for Disease Control related to vaccines.
This conflict between medical freedom and medical coercion, it's a fundamental conflict that we must resolve now in favor of medical freedom or forever be truly slaves to medical tyranny.
I am so glad that there are people like you who are still fighting this.
Children's Health Defense. If you don't know what they do, folks, look it up.
We have got to, as a society, global, decide, is medical coercion okay? Or do you have a right to decide what happens to your body?
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.